Welcome to the Hero Next Door podcast, where we feature stories of everyday heroes, people who show caring through their actions. I'm Marilyn Fitzpatrick. I'm a psychologist and an emerita professor of counseling psychology at McGill University. Today, our hero is Tiberio Malaiu. Our focus for this episode is on how youth develop a sense of purpose and how they act on that. Tiberio is a young man who lives in Chile. Like many of us, he got bored in the pandemic and ended up starting a project that has helped many children in Chile stay in school. He's a passionate and purposeful young man who inspires me. After we hear from Tiberio, we'll be talking to Professor Kendall Cotton Bronk. Kendall received her PhD from Stanford University. Her career is devoted to studying youth purpose. She and I will talk about what purpose is and how it differs from other kinds of goals. She has plenty of expertise in how purpose impacts young people, what happens to them when they develop a sense of purpose, and we'll be considering what purpose contributes to the lives of youth, including those who don't, by reason of their circumstances, get a great start. We'll also be diving into ideas of how to cultivate purpose in young people, as a parent, as a teacher or community leader, as a counselor or therapist. So by the end of today's episode, you'll have a better understanding of what purpose is and how to nurture it in youth, and maybe even some ideas for yourself. And you'll have the inspiring words of Tiberio Malaiu as a shining example of youth purpose.
So my name is Tiberio Malaiu, and yes, I started this project where we collect smartphones, so broken smartphones. We fix them and then we give them to kids. At the end of 2020, October more or less, we managed a project where we helped students in a very, very vulnerable public school in Chile that, is linked to my school. We helped them do their homework basically via Zoom. So we were just helping them continue learning and as older students answering questions for younger students. Public schools in Chile, they didn't have online classes the entire 2020. Which is a huge problem. And some still don't have all the students connected up to this day. So I realized during this time that most of the students couldn't connect to our classes. Only like 8 or 9 were able to really connect and, receive our help, which was the basis of the program. A tough time for the entire country. We're not able to help children in very, very deep need because education is the foundation of our society. So that was very tough for me, right? It was a problem that stuck in my head. I didn't figure out something to do because I don't know what could a 17-year-old do at that time. So time went by, and in January 2021, I was stuck all summer in my house, quarantine on the weekends. I couldn't leave. I couldn't see friends. I was very bored. Curiosity made me try to figure out how a smartphone looked and worked from the inside. I had no idea how it worked, how it functioned. I was completely clueless. But I just bought the tools without thinking. I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this now. And I opened the smartphone, which was my mother's smartphone. The first phone I tried to fix, in quotes, because I didn't fix anything. I completely broke it. But in that process, I learned, the subtleness of certain parts and how to manipulate the device, what you should and what you shouldn't touch, which processes, what comes first, the steps, and basically how to really open a smartphone. I learned basically online on my own. And after a lot of trial and error, I discovered I could fix a smartphone. And at that time, I was like, wait, I just fixed a smartphone with my own hands. What if I give this, I give this device to children and I keep on doing the same? And I was like, you know what? Yes, I'm gonna do this. Why not? I have time. I'm bored. I really want to help somebody. I've discovered this problem. Why don't I use my own time and effort to do this? And that's when the project began. But this isn't a one-man show. I need to clarify. It's a team. And it all began when my brother said, you know what, Tiberio, I don't know how to fix smartphones. I've been seeing you fixing for a couple of last days. Can I learn? Can I help you? And he also started helping and fixing devices with me. And that's when the project became, I discovered that the real future of the project was in the teamwork. My brother was very kind to start drawing, getting all the animations and everything, all the flyers and posters. So we started sending them to WhatsApp and me and all the social media. And we started getting a lot of devices. The way we fix smartphones is why this project is so beautiful. We do not buy parts. What we do is we receive, for example, 3 broken phones, completely destroyed, screens, batteries, antennas, whatever it is destroyed. And we mix parts between each other, and we create one fully functioning phone, which will later be donated to our children in a vulnerable school. When we began, we had no clue on where we were going to get parts to fix broken devices, because we just had a lot of broken phones, and we're like, well, are we going to buy them? But bear in mind, we are students with no money, we were like, what? And that was really a difficult challenge, trying to figure out how to, and we figured out this solution, which turned out to be the best one. And that was the beauty, because everybody could work. You just needed the time, the energy, and the motivation to do so. And that's how this project started growing. The beginning was very slow, but then a couple of people started writing, and they were like, hey, Tiberio, I would really like to join. I have spare time. Could you please teach me how to fix smartphones? And I was like, yes, of course. Why not? And that's how the group started getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I realized that this could really be a project which we could really have an impact on different schools, on people, and the educational process of students around Chile. That evoked true happiness in me, because I saw my time, my effort, my knowledge, everything I had learned, all the effort I had put into fixing this device in the hands of another student. And I knew that student was going to be able to continue their educational process and at least get another chance to keep on learning, which is why I believe the most important thing we can do as humans. And this has further raised my awareness on the problems we have yet to solve, and how important this is to our society, on how important it is for us to have a good and strong education for everybody, not for just some, because if only some get the quality education, then they basically, they can, I wouldn't say control, but take advantage of the others that are not as aware as them on certain topics and situations. So I think it has made me more aware of social issues and made me try to find other and new ways to combat them. In how to start, I believe that you don't need to fly to a rural country and try to change the world in somebody else's backyard. I think there's a lot of issues right in your community which you could start off by confronting. And it doesn't have to be a huge project and be all over. It's just something that makes a difference. If it has to be huge, and it'll be huge, then time will tell, and then good for you. But the objective is not making something huge. The objective is helping. I think that helping others and really helping others makes a difference, not only in them, but in you. You really feel the difference. As I said, there's just something, I call it true happiness, but maybe somebody feels it a different way. And it's just a feeling you get when you're really helping others by stepping in their shoes. So what I mean by social work is not just, giving something monetary or something material. It's more as giving your time, your effort, and your knowledge. Giving those 3 things is really what's most valuable to you as a person. Your most valuable thing is time. And if you really give another your time, you're really stepping in that person's shoe and showing them that you care. And that evokes a feeling in you that's really, really special. I had the chance to experience it, and it's addicting. It's beautiful to help. And I think that's the only inspiration you should really have to start these things, is to really help.
So I'm here this afternoon with Kendall Bronk. Kendall got her PhD from Stanford University, and she's currently a professor of psychology in the Division of Behavioral and Social Sciences at Claremont Graduate University. She studies youth, and particularly youth purpose. What does purpose look like in youth, with particular emphasis on young people who are facing global challenges, and how do they navigate those challenges and find purpose. She's also has a lot of expertise in creating and testing strategies for fostering purpose among youth, and she's going to share some of those tools with us today. So welcome, Kendall.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
It's wonderful to get to talk to you. I know you've had a chance to look at Tiberio's interview, and we talked for a couple of minutes before we started. He's truly an inspiring young man, isn't he?
He really is. What an inspiring young person. Yeah, really a great example of purpose.
He truly is. So talk to us, if you can, a little bit about how you understand youth purpose. So what actually is purpose in a young person? And maybe also tease out for us a little bit how that's different from just goals.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so when we think about purpose, I think about kind of a compass, right? That's sort of pointing us in a particular direction, and a purpose acts like that. It's pointing us in the direction where we want to, head in our lives and what we want to accomplish in our lives. We've been really engaged in our lab here at Claremont Graduate University in studying purpose. And when we want to study purpose, we have to have a pretty clearly delineated definition of purpose. And actually, I think talking through that can be kind of helpful. So the way that we think about purpose, it has really three components. The first is sort of a goal-oriented component. There definitely is a dimension of goal orientation in a purpose in life, because there's something that a young person is working towards, something they want to accomplish, something they want to make progress to. And I think one way that a purpose is different from a goal is that it may or may not be a goal that's ever fully achievable, right? If you want to, young people sometimes find purpose in doing things like Tiberio trying to help young people gain access to education, which is a terrific goal, but in a terrific aim and a terrific intention, but it may never be fully realizable. I mean, there's so many young people in the world who still lack access to education. So when we think about the goal-oriented dimension of purpose, it's important to keep in mind that it may or may not be an aim that is fully achievable, but it is definitely one towards which you can make some progress, as Tiberio clearly did. So that's the first dimension. A purpose in life has this sort of goal-oriented intention behind it. The second component is that we have lots of goals, or lots of even goal-oriented sort of intentions in our lives. But a purpose is one that's really meaningful to us. It matters to us. In fact, it matters so much that we are willing to dedicate our time, our energy, and our personal resources in order to make progress towards it. Again, Tiberio is like the perfect example of that, because he took a ton of time learning how to rehab these cell phones and putting them to use with the young people in his community. So he was really not just something that mattered to him and that he talked about, but something that mattered so much that it motivated him to act.
It was really that action component, That's a tremendously important piece.
Exactly. Tremendously important. And that's what I think differentiates a purpose from like a dream or a hope, important things, but that active engagement really differentiates it. So we have that goal-oriented intention. You have that personal meaningfulness that motivates action. And then the third component of purpose that I think is really important to keep in mind is that it's not just directed towards ourselves, right? It's not just, I want my purpose in life is to be rich and famous, right? That may give your life meaning. It's possible, but we wouldn't say that's a purpose because that's only directed at the self. Whereas a purpose is also, it's inspired by a desire to make a difference in the world beyond the self. So Tiberio wasn't doing this for himself. I love when he says, the real motivation, really, it came from seeing those pictures of the kids and they were just grinning ear to ear. I love that. Yeah. But I mean, it's really clear he wasn't doing it for himself. He wasn't doing it for, fame or glory. I mean, he was really doing it for the young people. It enabled him to make a difference in the lives of somebody beyond himself. So when we think about purpose, we want to keep in mind, I think, all of those components, that goal-oriented intention, really personally meaningful, so much so that it moves you to act. And the third part, that it's inspired, at least in part, by a desire to make a difference in the world beyond the self.
Tiberio spent quite a bit of time talking about how he felt the project he was doing benefited him.
Yeah.
Is that typical?
Yes, it actually is. It's very typical. And that's why I say, at least in part, motivated by a desire to make a difference in the broader world, because what we see is that most human activities have, there's multiple motivations for almost all the things that we do.
Yeah.
And young people do tend to find purpose in completing activities that are personally fulfilling as well. In fact, we often find that purpose is sort of the intersection of your skills and your talents. And they enable you to take those skills and talents and put them to work doing something that's meaningful to you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So obviously he had this real special skill. I could never do this around fixing cell phones, figuring out how to take broken. I mean,
when he started though.
I know, right?
Like, imagine taking it apart and going, oh, I wonder how that works.
Oh, I get nervous pushing buttons that I'm going to undo something. Yeah, exactly. I mean, they were taking parts from different phones and rebuilding them. That's remarkable. Mm-hmm. But even more remarkable, I think, is that he found a way of using his special skill to act in a way that was really meaningful to him, to benefit others. I mean, there's a lot of people probably who, not myself, but who might know how to do this kind of cell phone reconstruction work. Mm-hmm. But that's only part one. He figured out a way to take this skill and to use it to benefit the young people in his community who didn't otherwise have access to education. And so that's that second part, is taking your special skill or talent and using it to address a personally meaningful need in the broader world. And it does feel good. I mean, that's the good news about purpose. It's not usually a miserable pursuit. It can be difficult at times, yes, but it's so meaningful that it can also be really wonderful and joyful kind of experience.
So in your work, I've seen you tell stories of other young people and how they found their purpose, or what their purpose meant to them. Do you think, so Tiberio was 17 at the time of that interview, mm-hmm, and do you think a 17-year-old or a young person of university age, should they expect themselves to know this? Because I look at his path and he kind of stumbled on it almost, in the sense, it's like, I'm kind of bored, let me take this cell phone apart. Oh, and I'm trying to reach these young people for tutoring and I can't get to them. Like, it all just, it wasn't as if this was a plan. He simply grabbed some things that were in his environment and worked with them.
Yeah. No, and I think our research would suggest, and this kind of is backed up by Tiberio's experience, that there are sort of three paths to purpose. Mm-hmm. One is, like you said, there are some young people who have a plan. There are some young people who say, here's this great big need in this world, and I am going to figure out how to address it. So the need comes first, and they take the steps they need to take in order to, work towards that goal or that purpose. Okay. There is some portion of young people for whom that's their path to purpose. But then there's another path to purpose where actually young people will look at other people and say, wow, look at what Tiberio's doing. That's really cool. I want to do something like that in my life. So what they do is they look towards others as sources of inspiration, and that inspires their own purpose. But then the third path is really what I think we saw Tiberio take, which is more of you're doing something and you start to realize, wait a minute, this matters to me. Like I kind of fell into it because he was just I think he was doing the tutoring. And like you said, then he was unable to reach the kids and he realized like, wait, that mattered to me, engaging with those kids and helping those kids. We don't know exactly what his motivation was in the first place for getting involved with, it sounds like it was a school activity.
Yeah,
but yeah, but once he was doing it and all of a sudden he couldn't do it, he realized like, wait, this matters to me. These young people matter to me. I want to find a way to help them. So it's through being involved in something and almost looking backwards and recognizing like, yes, this matters to me. And that's how you sort of find your purpose. So one's more forward looking, you set a goal, you work toward it. Another one is, looking at young people, other people who have done something and being inspired by that to do sort of the same kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And the other is doing all these different activities and looking backwards and realizing, wait, it's not until I'm further along that I realize this really does matter to me. And this might be my purpose. And I didn't set out for it to be my purpose, but it turns out that it is.
So if there's young people listening to us, they shouldn't be concerned that like, I don't know what to do.
Right. Yeah, no, that was the first part of your question. Sorry, I didn't get to that.
That's okay.
You're right. Most young people, I mean, Tiberio is pretty exceptional. And most young people, they are still figuring it out, even into their mid-20s. In fact, our research would suggest that even most adults are still figuring it out. Mm-hmm. So that's not to say we shouldn't try, but I hope it is to suggest that there shouldn't be a lot of anxiety around recognizing that we're still figuring it out, because that's very much a natural process. Our research kind of suggests that maybe 1 in 10 young people in the middle school years has a good sense of what their purpose might be. So very rare. In the high school years, which is actually where Tiberio would be, mm-hmm. Maybe 1 in 5 can young people kind of have a sense of where they're headed and right. grasp on their purpose. College age young people, maybe 1 in 3. And then adults, it's only about 40%. So I guess this is to say, yeah, don't worry, not everybody else has it sorted out. It takes some time, but you can get there.
So we'll talk really, I hope, in some detail about ways that to get there. But first, maybe you would talk to us a little bit about what happens to people when they have a sense of purpose.
Good.
I'm really excited, but what happens in general?
Yeah. One thing I want to mention just before I do is I want to say that I actually really believe that all people have a purpose. 100% of people have a purpose. I really do. And I think that for the people who are falling into the, showing up on our surveys as not having purpose, I think they haven't really gotten in touch with it yet. And so I really do believe that all people have a purpose and that all people are able to connect with that purpose. They just haven't done it yet. So I think if you're a young person and you're feeling a little bit of anxiety around, like, I feel like I should have this figured out and I don't, just add that yet to the end. It's coming, it's possible. I don't think there's anybody who doesn't have a purpose. It's just, maybe we haven't connected with it yet.
It's like Carol Dweck's idea of mastery learning, right? I don't know yet, but I'm going to know.
We're going to get there. I think that's an important point to make.
Okay.
Your other question, though, was around what are some of the benefits associated with leading a life of purpose? And it turns out there are tons, which is really inspiring to learn. I would put them into sort of 3 general buckets. The first is the psychological benefits associated with leading a life of purpose. So you could just hear the good feelings sort of oozing off Tiberio as he was talking about it. And that's really typical. We find that young people with purpose compared to young people who don't have their purpose yet identified, they tend to report higher levels of hope and positive affect and life satisfaction. So all the things we really want for our young people. In addition to psychological well-being, there's actually a decent amount of research coming out that looks at physical health benefits. It turns out that individuals with a purpose in life tend to be physically healthier than individuals who lack a purpose. And so things like cardiovascular functioning is better among young people with, I should say really adults. Most of the research here is with adults with purpose, less chronic pain. Individuals with purpose sleep better. They report fewer sleep disturbances at night, which I always is kind of remarkable, but maybe not as remarkable as the fact that research pretty consistently finds that individuals with a purpose in life, they live longer lives. So purpose is associated with longevity. And it could be the case that, a lot of this research is sort of correlational. So it could be that having a purpose in life contributes to good health, or that being, maybe healthier people are more likely to develop a purpose. But it turns out that most of the research suggests that having a purpose in life is likely to contribute to these health benefits. So there's all kinds of epigenetic research looking at that. And people with purpose tend to engage in more health sustaining behaviors, seeing their doctor, getting enough sleep, all these different kinds of things. So really inspiring there. And then sort of the third bucket is the academic well-being. So we're talking about young people with purpose. And as they are figuring out what their purpose is, they're more likely to report high scores of grit. And grit is sort of this desire to stick with it. I realize, certainly Tiberio he talked a lot about working on these phones. I think he wasn't successful at this first one, but he stuck with it. And we do see that young people with purpose tend to be grittier. They also tend to be more resilient. They're better prepared to sort of bounce back from the challenges that they encounter at school or outside of school. And one thing that's really remarkable, but I think you see this in Tiberio's story, they find their schoolwork to be much more meaningful. And I think that makes sense. If you know what it is that you are hoping to achieve in your life, and you can see how the things that you're doing in school now are helping to get you there, it makes sense that work would feel more meaningful to you. And Tiberio didn't necessarily talk about what he was doing in school, but he definitely found a lot of meaning in sort of struggling with these phones and figuring them out once he realized what he was going to, do with them.
So there's certainly lots and lots of benefits for people, adults as well as young people, in understanding their purpose and living their purpose. Let's talk a little bit, if we can, about how they get there. Like what, I know you've studied, I don't know if you'd call them interventions or ways to help young people or adults. Lots of adults would like help with this work too. So how do you have different categories of those that you could let us know about?
Yeah. So lots of different strategies that we have found to help cultivate purpose. So I'll share a few of those strategies with you. One of the things that I do want to sort of preface this with is that what works for one person may or may not work for another. So if this strategy, if this is something maybe you're working with young people and you're thinking, I don't know if that would work, but maybe if I changed it like this, try it. There's nothing magical about what I'm sharing. And
okay.
I think that making modifications doesn't necessarily mean these won't be effective. And I just want to, the other thing I want to say too, is to keep in mind, especially if you are a young person, that finding your purpose in life, it's a developmental thing. It kind of goes along with things like identity development, figuring out who you are, and often at the same time. So figuring out who you are is sort of the identity part, but a lot of young people are also trying to figure out what is it I want to accomplish in my life. And that's sort of that purpose part. They tend to kind of go along together, but you can't really rush identity development. And so purpose development is also going to unfold a little bit at its own timetable. So be patient with yourself. That said, we do have some strategies that I can share with you. I think I always like to start with this, one of the very first studies we ever conducted on youth purpose was where we sort of stumbled into this idea of how we might be able to help cultivate purpose. So like all good science, it was a sheer accident. We were doing this study, right? Yeah. In all humility. We were doing this study and we administered surveys to about 1,000 young people across North America. And the surveys were designed to get a sense of how much purpose they had in their lives. We just randomly selected about 100 young people and they participated in this interview with us. The interview was like a one-time, maybe 50-minute conversation designed to take a little deeper dive into how they developed their purpose, what they saw their purpose as, right? The content of their purpose, supports and obstacles to pursuing their purpose, that kind of thing. And invariably, we would finish the interviews and young people would say like, wow, I said some good stuff in there. I liked where I was going. Can I get a copy of that recording, or can I get the transcript? And that got us wondering, like, is it possible that this interview was an intervention without, meaning to be? So, as luck would have it, we had actually planned to survey everybody, all 1,000 young people, several months later after the interview. So it was like 18 months between the two survey periods. So one of my colleagues, Matt Bundick, he actually decided to look at the young people who participated in this interview, their time 1 and time 2 survey scores on purpose, and the young people who didn't participate in the interview and their rate of change in purpose. And as you probably anticipated, that the young people who participated in this one-time interview about the things that matter most to them had significantly higher scores on purpose. So this is,
and that was like 2 months later, wasn't it?
Oh, it was like 9 months later.
9
Yeah.
months later.
Yeah. So, so I think, so I guess this points to a couple things. One is that you can find your purpose. And this is probably why I also believe that everybody had a purpose probably before. And the interview, this act of sort of talking it through with young people and pushing them a little, like, say more, tell me more about that. And, asking questions. What do you want to accomplish in your life, and why? Why would that be important to you? These kinds of things really push them to help them connect with something that was probably already there, but they hadn't really articulated before. And in fact, this interview was so effective, we actually turned it into an activity my colleagues at Stanford did that's available online, and it's called Understanding Purpose Through Interviews. Maybe we can put a note to it in the show notes.
Link. Yeah.
Below. Yeah. But it's available. Anybody can use it. And it gives you some guidance on how to sort of do an abridged version of the interview that we administered. It also takes you through this sort of mind mapping activity where you think about what are the things, that you care about, and connecting those to skills, and helps you sort of draw some of those connections. So I think that's the first strategy to think about, is maybe you want to try it if this is appropriate for you.
I think, well, it reminds me, there's quite a bit of values research on priming, right?
Right.
Like you prime a value, and then you measure, if you prime a caring value, you measure the caring recommendations people make about the environment or the things that they're going to do to help the researcher. There's a bunch of studies out there. And so it sounds like that's kind of what you were doing. You took your prime and you turned it into an intervention, which is really creative.
Yeah. And I think one of the key things too is there's a reflective component. So I think that in our busy lives, we don't always step back and think about what is it that I want to accomplish in my life. And this interview, it necessarily carved out time and focus the young person on that. Take some time. There's moments in the interviews where there's just silence to say, take a moment and think this through. And that could be pretty powerful to help carve out that time in that space and scaffold that self-reflective process that I think is really key to cultivating purpose.
That's great. And the online intervention, if people are involved as counselors in schools or community leaders or something like that, those are things they have kind of a template to start to work with with the young people who come into their orbit. Exactly.
It's an easy sort of guided activity to walk through with a young person. But if that's not an appropriate way to interact with the young person, another option is to be a model of purpose. I think that we as adults, we interact with young people, and we don't always step back and share our own purpose in life with the young people in our lives. Mm-hmm. So whether you're a teacher or a parent or a mentor, there are opportunities to think about, if you have clarity around your own purpose, to share that with a young person, and to use the language of purpose, and to sort of talk about the way in which you discovered your purpose. So in some ways, Tiberio's example is so inspiring that it might make some young person feel like, wow, he's amazing. And I'm not sure that I could do something quite so impressive. And so, but if you're working with a young person as a teacher or mentor or something, your example might feel a little more accessible. At least there's that possibility. So consider talking with a young person about your own purpose. We also find that when you share something as intimate and personal as your own purpose with the young person, it tends to result in bonding, right? There's going to be some. So even if that's not the story that cracks it all open for the young person, which it might be, but even if it's not, there's going to be good stuff that kind of comes out of that. So I think that's another thing to think about.
And it is true that when we talk about our purpose in life, that's something that's moving, eh? It's something like I know when I do this, I feel almost shy.
Yeah, right. There's a vulnerability.
Like there's, yeah.
And yet and that's, I think that facilitates that social connection too. So it can really help a young person. It provides them with a really unintimidating example of purpose. It helps them start thinking about their own purpose. And like I said, it has this sort of added side benefit of often sort of cementing or strengthening that social bond. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Another activity that we have tried in our own lab and found to be quite effective is this email activity. And what we did in this activity was we asked young people, send an email to 5 different adults who know you well. So these could be extended family members, it could be a boss, it could be a coach, it could be a mentor, but identify 5 adults who you think know you really well and ask if they will answer 3 questions about you, the young person. And the 3 questions we want these adults to answer are, number 1, what do you think I do particularly well? Number 2, what do you think I really enjoy? And number 3, how do you think I will leave my mark? And it turns out that you want to make sure to ask the adult, please only spend 5 minutes. You want their gut reaction. Sometimes adults will get a little tangled up in, oh my gosh, I want to word this just right. That's not the point. The point is you want their gut reaction. You want to make sure they get to it and get it back. But what we have found is for the young people who get responses from the adults in their lives, it can be really eye-opening. Like, wow, 3 of the people who knew me said they really recognized my skill with maybe in Tiberio's case, technology, or with children, or who knows. And sometimes that is really enlightening for a young person. It can be help, so maybe the young person themselves doesn't really know what their purpose is yet, but this collection of adults together might offer insight that offers a pretty good starting point for thinking about what it could be.
At the very least, they come away feeling there are 5 people in the world who notice me and care about me.
Well, and that's the other thing I was going to say is each of these activities has merit and utility in their own right, even if they don't successfully cultivate purpose. We have found that they do. I mean, we have tested them, but they don't 100% of the time for 100% of the people. We compared them to memory activities and things like that. So they do help. But yes, exactly. Like you said, even if they aren't immediately effective around purpose, there's good stuff that comes out of them. One of the other activities that I wanted to suggest is just doing exactly what Tiberio did, which is engaging in the community. So he was involved, if he hadn't been involved in this volunteer work, working with the young people as a tutor, he probably would have never developed this purpose. At least it's possible he wouldn't have, because he wouldn't have known about the need. And so helping, and again, research is really clear here that when young people get involved in working in the community, in volunteering their services, they start to see right away how, wow, I have skills that the world needs. Right. Yeah. I can be useful to the world beyond myself. And maybe even I feel a little sense of responsibility now to find a way to give back and to contribute and to use my skills, because I recognize that the world needs what I have to offer. And again, just as with the other ones, there's a lot of good stuff that comes from volunteer work. You develop skills, you develop confidence, you strengthen social bonds. There's all these good things that come from it anyway.
Contents.
Exactly. But it can also be an impetus for the development of purpose. I will say there are just two things here, though. When you are helping a young person engage in the community, really important to let them choose the way they get involved. Avoid saying, we all are doing this one thing, because that may or may not be meaningful to the young person. And if they feel like they're doing something that they don't really want to do, that they didn't have any say in, it's probably not going to have the positive effect that you're hoping it will. The second thing is encourage the young person to really reflect on it. Encourage them to think through, what difference are you making? What difference, how are you contributing, and what does that feel like? But that reflective activity is really important. Important to them, both, feeling a connection to the activity and to ultimately using it as a jumping off point for the development of purpose.
Yeah. And in Canada, there are often parts of courses or school credit given for engaging in the community, doing some sort of volunteer activity. So those are like introductions for young people to find a place, to see, okay, so what do I like? Did I like doing this? Does this move me?
Yes. And I think that's exactly right. Young people, especially in the high school and college years, are engaged in that search for self. And to be honest, this is kind of where the search for a self really kind of hits a high point during these adolescent and young adult years. The truth is, though, it is a lifelong process, and it extends beyond. So even adults are thinking about identity development. But again, as you're thinking about sort of a young person, an adolescent or a young adult identity development, they're trying to figure out, where do I fit into this great big world? What's my place? And so getting them out there to engage in the world and to see themselves as really useful contributors is something that they're kind of ready to do. They're like, developmentally, this is where they are and this is where they want to be. So you're helping them through this process of identity development as well. But it's very much where young people are. In fact, one of the things that we notice about adolescents and young adults is they're kind of hungry for feedback from the broader world. This is why I think that email activity is really useful. I don't know if you have, I happen to have a couple of adolescents at home myself. And I noticed that when I, as a parent, tell them something, it's kind of in one ear and out the other. But when a family friend or a mentor or a trusted neighbor says it, my kids will kind of hang on to that. Like, you're right, I am good at that. And that is something I should think about. Or, yeah, I do care about that. You're right. And of course, I'm thinking, I just told you that. But they're really attuned to the feedback they're getting from adults outside the family, because they're trying to find their place in this world. So that's why I think these kinds of activities that get them out there, whether it's, through an email activity and they're getting feedback from others, or volunteering in the community where they're getting some feedback from others, those kinds of activities tend to be really, really effective.
And adolescence, if I read your work correctly, adolescence is a time where that search for purpose and that search for meaning, it can be associated with some distress later in life that doesn't appear for young people, right?
No, I think that's exactly right. Yeah, we did a study and we found that having identified a purpose for your life was associated with life satisfaction in the adolescent, young adult, and midlife ages. So kind of all the way across the board. But searching for a purpose, it was sort of neutral at adolescence and young adulthood. But if you're still searching at midlife, it can be somewhat distressing. And I think it's really just because of societal expectations, right? We sort of expect young people to be figuring these things out. Young people in their high school and college years, they're meant to be exploring. And so we kind of celebrate that search. And unfortunately, by midlife, even though many adults don't have it figured out just quite yet, there's sort of a societal expectation that they should, which I think is wrong, because we know that many, probably even most adults don't have it all sorted out yet. So
which I think is going to be encouraging for people to hear, in a sense. Like, if you don't have it sorted out, you're in the majority.
Exactly,
Like,
exactly.
That's that this is a tough thing to do,
Yeah,
and you can get feedback from different places. It's a kind of a trial and error. Let me
exactly.
see if I can do this. Maybe I could fix a cell phone. Who knows?
I could figure something out. Yeah.
But who would know that that would turn into a
Right?
purpose in a
I know.
sense? So there's like this process that's available through your lab of kind of asking yourself the questions: what am I good at? What do I care about? Those are important questions at every phase of life, really.
Exactly. And I think when we think about adulthood, one thing to keep in mind is, well, a couple things to keep in mind. I think one first point to make is that the truth is, I don't think we have one purpose in life, that we're born with it and we die with it and that's it. I think
Mhm.
we have multiple purposes in life. And these are, you can have multiple long-term aims that are so meaningful that they motivate you to act and that they're inspired by this desire to make a difference in the broader world. And we expect it to be long-term or else it wouldn't be a purpose, but it doesn't mean it has to last your whole life. So I know there's a lot of research to suggest that adults often find purpose in parenting, but that doesn't become a purpose until you have children. And
And it doesn't stay a purpose after they're grown up.
that's what I was just
Like,
going to say.
they don't
Exactly.
just need everything they used to need.
Not quite the same way. Yes, exactly. And many of us as adults, we find purpose in the work that we do, right? Through the work that enables us to hopefully feel like we're contributing in a useful way to the broader world.
Mhm.
Let's say we retire, or maybe we lose a job, or we change jobs, we move. You know, there are all kinds of transitions in life, and that can often affect the way that our purposes wax and wane. And I think that it's good to approach those transitions as opportunities. They can be times when our purposes wane or disappear altogether, but there are also opportunities to develop new purposes.
And the values that were the foundation of those purposes, because I kind of, that's how I think about it. I think of values as leading to purpose, and purpose ultimately as leading to meaning. If the values led you through the raising of your children and they will lead you to something else too, if you look.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Yeah. So for adults, I think it's important to keep in mind that you'll have multiple purposes. They will wax and wane. There may be moments when a purpose sort of comes to a logical conclusion for whatever reason. And that can feel, I think, sort of uncomfortable, but that's also an opportunity to embark on a new purpose. And there's this really interesting study that actually finds that our purpose tends to dip in years that end in, or not really dip, but at least be called into question in years that end in 0. So I think what happens is we have these transitions from 29 to 30, from 39 to 40, and just this natural, right? Getting a little older and stepping back and thinking about, so even if you don't have a transition where you've lost a job, just getting older, there are natural transitions built into that. And those are times that people tend to step back and sort of reflect on what matters most to them. And again, I think it's great to approach them as opportunities, rather than, it's not always the case that you're going to be losing something, but as an opportunity to sort of engage in that self-reflection and thinking about what matters most to you. But I thought that was so remarkable that those years just naturally lend themselves.
And are you talking about like 2020, or you're talking about when I turned 20?
Your own age.
Okay, yeah.
You move from 19 to 20. And I think we see this among young people as they get ready to graduate from high school and as they get ready to graduate from college, as you go through these transitions that naturally, these milestones, exactly. And as adults, I don't think we have, there might be times when you get married or have children or things like that, but they don't happen at the same age. So it's harder to see and I think that's I'm sure they go on, if we looked at people before they have children, that's probably a time or right after they have a child, but they would naturally reflect on this kind of thing. But the birthdays, it turns out, are actually significant.
Really important.
I know, right?
Kendall, thank you so much for this. This has been a very, very interesting conversation. And I think a real help in understanding, like sort of jumping off from Tiberio and thinking about this topic in a broader sense. And I hope that people are listening really get a sense from you of what to do with the young people in their life to help them in this way. So
thank you for the opportunity. I always love the opportunity to share what we're learning with people who might be able to actually put it into good use. So thanks. I appreciate the opportunity.
I hope you've enjoyed today's episode of Hero Next Door, and that the words of our hero, Tiberio Malaiu, and the thoughts of our expert, Dr. Kendall Cotton Bronk, have given you ideas that will help you understand and develop purpose in yourself and in the youth that you care about. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to Hero Next Door on your podcast channel or on YouTube. And join us again to hear the stories of everyday heroes and to learn how to identify, cultivate, and enjoy your caring values. The very best of you.